Becky, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, for whatever reason, my audio on my computer is not working. So if it's too distracting to have me on camera, I can just do a phone in. It's whatever you all
Yeah,
want.
your audio and visual look great, so I think you're good to go.
Okay, I apologize for that, guys. I think it's 1:30. I think I made us late. Is Mr. Perkins on yet?
I don't actually believe he'll be attending today. He let me know yesterday that he might not be on the call because he's out.
Okay, then I call the meeting to order 5 minutes late. Again, I apologize. DeLucci's here, Mr. Hobart, you're here. Becky, who else is on the call with us?
Today we have Cindy Gray, Adam Norris, someone who's logged in is, I think that's supposed to be Brian Kidney. I think he might be logged in twice. Councilmember Hobart, yourself, Mark Perry, the Soft Resources team, and Zach Walker.
Hello, Mr. Walker. What is the Soft Resources team?
That's
I
me.
believe they were on the.
I'm working with Brian on the.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Okay, I call the meeting to order. The first item of business is approval of the minutes of August 28th. And I guess with Mr. Perkins not being here, Mr.
It's
Hobart.
me. I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, and I just have 2 questions about the minutes. Becky, do I ask my questions now or later? Because I think we have typos.
You can ask your questions if they pertain to any of the items during the agenda, or if you want to ask your questions now, if it's for staff or someone on the call, you can do that now if you'd like before approving them.
I would, because the first item under approval of the July 17 minutes, Dan, it says that DeLucci asked for a motion to approve the minutes, stating she had questions regarding the content of them. I believe I said I had no questions regarding the content of them. And there's another section, page 4, under fiscal year-end update, when Zach Walker is telling us about the year-end update. It recites that although revenues did fall short, it was as severe as the forecast in April. I believe what Mr. Walker said was it was not as severe as the forecast in April. And so, Zach, you're shaking your head that, yeah, you agree with that one.
Correct.
I really think the first one, also that I had no questions, is correct. So can I move to amend his motion and then we can approve the minutes, Becky?
Yeah, that's fine. If you'd like to make a motion to amend the minutes.
I so move.
Seconded.
And now Dan, you move to approve the minutes as amended.
Yes. Yes. Make a motion to approve the minutes with those 2 amendments by Council Member DeLucci.
Second. They're approved. August financial report.
Well, Madam Chair, I can go ahead and introduce this, and if Brian Kidney wants to jump in, or Cindy with any extra details, we'll do that as well. The month of August will represent the first 2 months of the fiscal year. So that's going to be about 16% of the fiscal year, if you will. You may notice, like, for example, on page 3, which is the general fund financials for the month of August, it'll say percent actual over there. So that's the actual amount that has been brought in thus far. You might want to just, like I said, compare that against, this would be the 16% mark of the fiscal year. And Brian, that's something we might think about, just saying that out loud, that's something we might think about adding on here, is just a notation of how far into the fiscal year we are, so that folks could kind of use this as a little bit of a management tool and know where we're at relative to fiscal year, just thinking out loud there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Fred.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, sir. But I would also say that, things are not, linear. Even though this is 16%, we know that, for example, November and December are huge sales tax months for us because of our holiday shoppers, for example. So you'll note that we're 13% of our revenues have been collected for taxes in the general fund, but we're also, anticipating higher amounts, November and December. So those are kind of some different things to look, but all that said, relatively speaking, our general fund revenues at 15.2%, so just slightly below that 16% of the current fiscal year. Expenditures a little bit above that number, 19.57%. I will tell you that is being driven largely by, if you look at the finance department line, that looks huge right now, 50% expended. However, this is where Brian has earmarked the capital outlay for the cybersecurity and technology upgrades that the council approved, and that is being largely reimbursed by the CARES Act COVID funds. So you're going to see some offsetting revenue coming into play here to help level that out eventually. So don't get too worried about that thus far. So the other one that's looks really huge on paper here is the law department, but upfront early in the fiscal year, we go ahead and encumber a lot of funds for our outside legal counsel services, the third party services that we utilize at the city. So that one also jumps out as well too. Otherwise, in the general fund, I would say our city departments are looking pretty good. We always want to keep an eye on public safety because of the overtime costs associated with them, but police is actually just slightly below where they would be at for the fiscal year. So we can see 15.9%. Fire is a shade above that at 19.8%. So we'll want to make sure the best that we can, we manage those overtime expenses. But all in all, I can report to the committee, I'm pretty pleased with where we're at relative to budget in the general fund so far this fiscal year.
Mr. Kidney, how does everything else look? Does it any?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian, please.
Yeah, sure. I'd like, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. The reason you see me on here twice is I am doing audio on my phone and then visual on the actual computer. So
yeah,
let me actually turn the camera on there. Yes. So if you don't mind, Zach, I might follow up a little bit with on page 1 with the general fund. As Zach mentioned, we're at around 15% of taxes. The sales tax itself is actually 19%. So as he said, we're at 16.6% of the year. And so 19%, we're up a little bit higher than what we expected in the budget. The reason the overall tax line item is down a little bit because we haven't received our first distribution yet for property taxes. That actually comes in November, or we record the revenue in November. And so that's why you'll see that down a little bit. And you could see the actual, if you're looking for just what the sales taxes are by themselves, you can go to like pages 2 to 6, which are the special tax funds. And so then you'll see that we're at 19% on the sales tax revenue for there. Nothing really sticks out in the sales tax funds. If you see the street sales tax, you'll see one of the expenditures is a little high, but that's exactly like Zach had mentioned with the general fund. It was a contract for street maintenance for the year. So when that contract hits, it's pretty much 100% for that item itself. And so it's all expended in the month that we enter into the contract. I think of really a big item of interest is pages 7 and 8 are the use taxes. And on those, you can see that they're well above what we budgeted. They're at 51%. And if you remember, the animal services part of that, that'll cap out at 750,000. And then at that point, the rest of the use tax will be going just into the police part of that until we hit the 35 officers. Now that will reset at each fiscal year. But at this point, we see this at 750. It looks like we'll hit that 750 very easily. And then you'll see more funds going into the police side of things. On pages 9 and 10 are the property tax portion of the health and recreation. And if you remember, part of the 21 budget is we pulled that part of the levy out of the general fund and put them into their own special funds. You'll see that they have a negative fund balance right now. And again, that's because we haven't had the first property tax distribution yet. So in November, you'll see that that won't be negative any longer. So I thought that might be something you'd be interested in. Page 11 is your transient guest tax. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, you've probably had other reports talking about that. And you'll see that the guest tax revenues are 11.5% of budget. So running under, obviously, what we were originally expecting.
Yep. Yep.
On page 15 is the license surcharge. And Councilmember DeLucia had a question about that last time. And just following up, I talked with Municipal Services, and the use of those funds are for the rest of the Valley View Parkway between Blue Springs city limits and where the Grace subdivision leaves off with their development. So that's the use of those funds.
So it's not like we can just use them. I mean, they are earmarked, they're dedicated, or however you budget people call it. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, if there's any follow-up on that, I would have to ask Lisa and her team to follow up with that. This is about as much as I know about that development.
Okay, okay.
So utility starts on page 17. Again, I think there's nothing that really sticks out. One thing I might
wonder, Brian, yeah, I'm gonna interrupt you. What's rental income? Is that under revenues? Is that like the water department's paying to be at the utility center? I was racking my brain trying to figure out where IPL had rental income.
You know, Kendra, our utility accountant, was just sharing with me earlier, most of the revenues in that area are inter-fund type revenues. I could follow up on that for sure, or more than likely, she'll probably text me.
You think I'm right, my guess?
Before the end of
I
this
think my guess
meeting.
is right.
I think it is. We can
That
confirm
wouldn't
that,
be
Brian.
like cell towers or anything, right? I mean, when AT&T pays us to put something on our power poles, that's not rent, or is it rent?
Yeah, that would be rent.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious then. If you could in the next couple weeks, so that next month maybe we know what that is, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anytime you see, again, capital projects that look like they're over budget, again, those are due to the contracts have been obligated for the year. So that's why you'll see those percentages higher.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested, I can go further down into the internal funds, event center, TIF funds.
I have my notes. Let me look at my notes.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Go right ahead, Dan.
Well, I was gonna get back off topic again, but I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Walker said this earlier, that percent actual, since we're 16% through the fiscal year, all those numbers in that right-hand side, percent actual, that those all work in relation to that 16% number.
Correct.
Could we get a column, and I know it's already busy, and maybe you already said this, I didn't understand. Could we get a column that just shows like we're up 3% on this, down 2% on this one? Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make any sense? Is that?
Sure. So instead of seeing 13%, next to that, you would have something that says down 3%.
Right. Just so it's easier in our non-accounting pea brains, my pea brain anyway. So I can, it's a lot easier to see whether something's up or down a little bit or off. That's all. It's kind of redundant, but
No,
You
these,
don't want to think?
these reports are literally you. So that's what we want to make sure we have for. With your permission, I might take off the original budget and just
Whatever
leave the
makes
revised
sense, yeah.
budget to free up some room there.
If Council Member DeLucci agrees with that, then that's
Oh, yeah.
probably fine by me.
He's much smarter on this than me. I mean, I noticed original and amended is always the same number, so it does make sense to take original off. So, yeah, it's fine with me.
All right.
Mr. Walker, it's your rodeo. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that adopted budget number really only matters on July 1st. And after that, it's that amended number that makes a lot more sense for both the accountants and then all of you as folks who need this as a management and decision-making tool. So I think Brian's suggestion is very well taken, and that is an edit we should make moving forward.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's it. So Karen, back to your notes.
Okay, well, I don't want to, okay, page 25. We're talking about the enterprise resource planning, and in July, the capital outlay was like non-existent, and this month it's 2.5 million. I assume we purchased something major. Is that a good assumption, Brian, or maybe I don't understand it that well? Under operating expenses?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anytime you see $2.5 million show up, I would expect you to ask. That's the actual payment, the annual payment we have
Okay,
for the expense.
okay. Got it.
You don't
Okay.
see revenue in this yet. You'll, in all the internal service funds, we make those transfers quarterly and usually the month after the end of the quarter. So
That's
for
when
instance,
you
that's why you don't see any revenue in there at all. In the September, you'll see 1/4 of the revenues in there.
Okay. And the only other question I have, and maybe it really doesn't matter, but back to your general fund, Mr. City Manager, there was that general government under expenditures, the 1.468 million, and that really is our little safety net there. And we had discussed, I thought maybe, it looks like there's an expenditure of $1.5 million, and there's not. And so last time I think we talked about maybe moving that around to showing everyone it really is a reserve fund balance. That it's our, and maybe I'm not remembering it correctly, but that's what I thought we were gonna do. And will that totally mess this page up? Is
No,
that a bad
Councilmember.
idea?
I believe you did suggest this last time, and that should work. And my apologies for not having
Oh,
this
no,
change.
that's fine. You know, because I don't know, it's just, every time I look at something under expenditures, I think, okay, that's a bill I'm paying. And so for us to have that almost 5 million, it really isn't a bill. It's a safety net, which I love having that as a safety net. So if it's not too much trouble, Mr. City Manager, will that totally mess you up? I don't want to mess anything up with you.
Nope, I think we can make that, I don't think that has any kind of issues, and we'll get that edited for the September report. That won't be a problem.
Is that right, Brian? You're okay with that too? Whatever you
The
are.
city manager says yes, of course I am.
Okay. Well, you're the one who's doing it.
Well, actually, Cindy, who's on the call, will actually make that.
Thank you, Cindy.
In actuality, towards the end of the year, you'll see the amended budget lower on that as transfers are made into the other expenditure funds. But I think we can relabel that like general government, COVID reserve or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, something like that. That'd be good. Okay.
Okay.
We interrupted you, Brian. Was there anything else you wanted to bring out to our attention?
No, I'm prepared to talk about any fund. I just don't want to take any time. I know
I don't
we
have any
time
more
limits on
questions,
this.
Dan, do you?
Not on the monthly budget, no.
Okay, cool. Then shall we move on? Specific
Yes.
line item expense report.
Councilwoman DeLucy and Councilmember Hobart, this was a report during the budget development process. There were a couple of line items in the budget that were looked at, whether or not we were going to be spending out of those this year into the full amount.
Oh, that's right.
And so we were asked to provide a monthly report about the status of those accounts. So Brian and his financial team have done a remarkable job, I think, of preparing that and tracking it. And Brian, if you want to just give a quick review of that report, that would be appreciated.
Sure. If you remember, last month we had a little difficulty navigating through it. So I thought it'd be best just to have as a spreadsheet online for you. It really, there hasn't been many expenditures difference from last time. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
I don't have any.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Is this format okay, spreadsheet wise?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Munis update.
If I might, Councilmember DeLucci, I wanted to chime in a bit before we jump on Mr. Kidney about this for the third month in a row. We, you know, I've thought a lot about this, and you know, Mr. Kidney, I want to make sure we convey this right, because it's been really easy. We have just seen Councilmember DeLucci did a fine job of going back through all the council meetings and the budget approvals for Munis. And we take a breath, get a couple new council members, and you know, here we jump in with both feet saying, why hasn't this been fixed in 4 years? And I know that you've got the consultant now that's taken a look at Munis. And I'm really curious, we're both curious, of course, probably everybody is, but you know, along the way, we've had these little issues, but they're not little, they're big, but they're paycheck issues, especially in payroll. And we're looking for like a brass tacks, like, is it fixed? Is it really fixed? Is it fixable? Are we on the right track? Is the consultant going to get us in line? More like a state of affairs.
Right.
Some update for us on that.
Yeah, I could take a stab at that. You know, first of all, I do want to reiterate that, yes, we've had problems in the past. There's been some stumble blocks. I am very comfortable that the software itself, the way it calculates, is in good shape. I think the mistake, or if you call it mistake, areas that I could have done better is identified that the system was a little out of whack. And we were trying to force the system that we were using to continue to do things like we have been. And so, you know, I realize I'm responsible for that. I sign the paychecks, and it's important to me to make sure that they're all correct. Now, I realize that there's always going to be, out of 1,100 paychecks, there's going to be something that happens from time to time. But I think generally what we're working on right now is to make sure that the process itself is working. And that's an area that still needs to be worked on. I'll be honest with you. Again, I feel very comfortable. My staff tells me when the software does what you tell it to do. Now it's just a matter of making sure you tell it the right things, if that makes sense. And as we were meeting this week already with Ron with Soft Resources, through his review, he has already pointed out areas within Munis that my staff hadn't been trained on that would have sped up that process, understanding how the process works, automating processes. And again, I think if we go back when our project manager, you know, we had a place where we didn't have a project manager, that's the time I should have said, wait a minute, I need to get a project manager in there to make sure these other items are being done, that we're addressing these other items. There's a lot of pieces, obviously, to this. And I feel like I'm babbling right now, but
Well,
there's some, yeah.
let me jump in. So very directly, will you be able to work with, or your staff or somebody, be able to work with the individual departments? And of course, fire is one of primary concern because their payroll is so complex.
Complicated.
But will your office be able to do that? I don't want to put a time frame on it, but make it somewhat of a priority or somewhere higher up on the list.
Well, I do. Yes, I will say it's already a top priority. We have shifted a lot of resources around in order to bring a payroll manager in. I'm very excited about that. She's been hired. Her first date is in a couple weeks.
Oh, we have a
experience.
payroll manager?
We have a payroll manager. She has a lot of experience with unions. That was a very high priority. She has a lot of experience with soft resources, which is a very complicated payroll system. So very similar, a lot of pay codes and union pay codes. So that was very important to us. So we're excited about that.
Oh,
So part of her, I can say her goal now, because it's her, is to bring in her team. And to me, the team are those departments out there, the people in charge of the payroll within each of the departments. Each month or every other week, she's going to be hand in hand with those people collecting the times, making sure they understand, help them with reviews, make sure if there's someone working out of pay, their checklist, that there's taking care of this. But on top of that, adding soft resources, basically bringing light to a lot of issues that now a lot of those processes, we believe we can make more automated. So between those two, I'm feeling a lot more comfortable where we're headed.
Awesome.
that's
I
good
can't
news.
give you a
That's
date.
good to hear.
Okay.
I think our department folks that talk to us and talk to our people, you know, in the community, that's good to hear. I'm happy to hear that. That's cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate everyone's patience, obviously.
So would soft resources, do they want to chime in on this review here?
Yeah, let us know. Yeah, let us know what you've been up to and like.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we've been really busy. That we got the project kicked off about 2 weeks ago. And this week we've done quite a few. We identified 12 key stakeholder groups, and we already have met with 3 of them. So we've met with quite a few people already, and we have another 7 scheduled for next week and some for the week afterwards. We're identifying a lot of key issues. We already have 12 so far. So that's good. We're reviewing the contract, and things are going really well. People are learning. It's kind of an educational experience because you sit, you know, in a virtual room with people and you look across it and I didn't know you were doing that. So it's been a really good process. And so I'm confident that we'll be able to identify the issues and then help to prioritize getting those taken care of. And as Brian said, working on the workflow and the business processes that will help us in a future state.
And do you, as part of your process, aside from sort of bring everybody together and identifying the issues, do you provide like the technical solution? Here's how you do this part. This is the training. These are the things that you need. Do you aid in that part of it? The solution part?
Well, we do aid in like the business process and the workflow. We are not Munis like specialists. That's not how we operate. But what we do is we'll help to identify the resources you need on both the city side and the Tyler Munis side to get this done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your, we've spent a lot of time, Councilmember DeLuce and I trying to pin people down on dates.
Yeah.
Is there a date that you feel comfortable saying this is our timeline or not?
Well, I mean, I am not in a position to tell you what I think your timeline is when Munis will be fixed and up and running. We anticipate, I want to get all of my research done in the next few weeks, and I'm thinking the end of October, beginning of November, I'll be able to put together a presentation and give it to the council or to this group if you'd like. We're also going to write a report for Brian as to what we think, and that's basically going to be your roadmap. Here's what we think you need to do. Here's where you need to apply your resources, and here's how long, if you do this, here's how long we think it will take.
Okay. All right. I would imagine, Councilmember DeLucci, I don't know if it's our choice or not. I'm sure we'd like to hear it first, but I don't know. Maybe Madam City Clerk can tell us what the procedure is for that. Does it matter?
My apologies, the procedure for what?
The Soft Resources is going to put together a report sometime in the next month-ish. And would it be appropriate for them to present it to us initially, and then if we needed to take action, then we would take it to the council, full council?
Are you wanting like a study session presentation?
We don't know yet. I'd kind of like to see the report first, but that's all right if we see that first, isn't it? That's my question.
Yeah, I don't see why that would be a problem.
Okay. So we'll just whenever you're done with the report and they let us know, we'll do initial run through on it in this committee, if that's all right, Madam Chairperson, and go from there.
Right, and then bring it to the general council. Yeah, because if we have questions, I'd like our questions to be answered first and then move forward to the other four, I think is the appropriate way to do it.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Okay. Can we move on to the next topic, or is there anyone else wanting to chime in? Okay. Approval of the annual audit plan for the management analyst. Okay. And I know that Mr. Toma Perry sent an email, which I, of course, didn't print. The very first thing we were going to do was fire department overtime. Oh, there it is. Shall I let you just speak, Mr. Toma Perry, so that I don't have to?
Yeah, that might work.
All right.
Everybody should be able to see on the screen the memo that was sent to the committee on August 12th.
Okay.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, we can
Okay.
see it. It's nice.
All right. So just, we discussed this last month. So this is just kind of an opportunity to come back and make final edits or final comments on what the audit plan should look like for the rest of the fiscal year.
Okay.
As we go down, right here is are the four items that I highlighted, and then the rest of the memo has some of the detail on it. So if there's any specific questions you want me to go through, want to be addressed, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. I'm just a simple lawyer. Like, the very first one I thought was important was the fire department overtime. But then I read the DKMT report more in depth, and I noticed that I'm thinking we might want to add to your job, Mr. Toma Perry, because, for example, on page 18 of the DKMT report, it talks about the capital improvement projects that through the years have been budgeted, but the expenditure was not made. And so there's money still sort of within each department earmarked, but those projects have not been moved forward. So I wonder, maybe very first thing we should do is see if there's some kind of money to be found in the various departments from capital improvement projects that have not moved forward.
Okay,
Do you understand what I mean?
Mr. Toma Perry, I guess I don't know much about this, and again, simple lawyer like count chairperson DeLucci. Apparently, it's a thing from time to time in cities to earmark this money and then complete the project or not complete the project, and sometimes the accounting side doesn't catch up to the end of the project. In other words, we think there may be some unspent or unallocated or not in the right spot money from projects from years past. Is that right?
That's what I think, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, and you're correct in saying that. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Off the top of my head, I see two things, or I have two questions. One would be going directly to the accounting system and seeing, what projects have funds encumbered. So what are the projects that are underway? And then the second one would be what projects have been discussed that are not yet underway, but we have money reserved for those. That's kind of the two approaches I would see. And I don't know, Mr. Walker, I think part of that is just could be a simple report out of the financial system, I think. So that would be a question to I could work with finance staff and go down that path.
Does this make sense to you, Mr. Walker?
Yeah, it does. I think this is good for organizations to do from time to time. And I think talking to Jim Nail and Adam Norris, that was certainly something that caught their eye from the Power and Light audit or review, if you will. So I think this would be good to do at a macro citywide level. It's just staffs get busy, you move on from one project to the next, you close out a project, but don't necessarily always remember to do the financial transfer. So it just is something that occasionally is good to go in and cull those accounts and make sure projects have been closed out, the punch lists have been completed, and if we've got excess funds, those pennies can add up and could help cobble enough together to do another capital project or projects, if you will. So I think this is very well taken in an appropriate use of time.
Well, and it's just, maybe I don't understand where it says the total available CIP budget. I mean, just because on paper it looks like there's $8 million, it could have been reallocated and it's not reflected here. So I think, especially in these times, we have got to know where every penny is. So if it's not too much trouble, I think that's a good use, number one, a good use of the very first job for our management analyst.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Just to make sure I'm understanding, Councilwoman, would this just be in response to the Power and Light projects or citywide?
No, citywide.
Right.
The Power and Light project alerted me to this issue, that's all. But I'm thinking if there's money in Power and Light, there's money in streets, there could be money in water, there could be money in tourism. I don't know. All
right, so it would be, as we look at the August financial report, on each of those funds, they had reserve funding for county, for capital projects. So that would be where we'd be targeting that report and looking at those amounts and detailing exactly what's behind those numbers.
Yeah, and it could be something from 2008. There's $312,000 that we never spent, and gee whiz, we're not going to spend it. It's been 12 years. We're not going to be spending that money. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, we can add that. I will add that as, I'll add that as number 4 and still have make number 5 the other reports.
So what's
And I
the very first,
I was gonna say that. Do we want to push this to the top of the pile? The top
I
of
do.
his list?
as the first priority, okay?
yeah, I do.
I think so too. There's a chance with our luck lately in Independence that we probably won't get a that big a bonus, but you never know. And like you said, counting our pennies is really important. So.
And then I'm also, and maybe I shouldn't be focused on fire department overtime. I mean, I thought we had talked last time about it being pretty important to do first, but maybe that's not so important.
Well, if you have a strong feeling on it.
Madam Chair, I was just from a city management perspective, if you'll
Yes.
recall just a little bit ago when we were reviewing the monthly financial reports, I mentioned that it's important to always pay close attention to the public safety overtime expenses, just because those are a huge portion of the budget. So I do think an independent analysis from the management analyst about how those costs are being incurred, how they're being managed, how they relate to federal labor law. It said any recommendations that the management analyst could find about how to further contain or manage those expenses. I think that would be a very good use of time from the city manager's office perspective. We would welcome that third party analysis of that to see how we could further contain those costs.
Just one item in terms of timing. Mr. Kidney just indicated that we'd hired a payroll manager. I think, and we were talking about the problems that we were having with fire payroll in general, not some issues. I'm wondering if giving that new person time to get in and get her feet wet, give her a week or so before we hit her with this, would be of value. So I'm thinking in terms of timing, it might be of value to wait, say, a month or wait till November to really kick that up into full gear, which might work out on the timing wise anyway, because we'll work on the capital projects first and then go to that. So I'm sensitive to the new person coming in and getting a feel for the software, but we'll have that report. We'll understand some of the bottlenecks and understand some of the work that needs to be done on the fire payroll processing. So that should all come together, I think, in November. I guess then that's kind of getting into what I was calling the activity-based budget performance metrics, and that's off of this matrix. That was one of the items down here as a cross-departmental, looking at the fire overtime. So I guess in terms of a process, would you want to work through and identify a priority for all of those today, or have that be an ongoing?
I read the code, and as I understand it, we have to come up with a suggested list of what your year is going to look like, what your audit reviews are going to look like, and submit that to the full council for them to take a look at it and then to chime in on whether they want to add or subtract or maybe reprioritize. So I'd like to have a list, a 1, 2, 3 list, in order for us to be able to bring that to council next week and have them look at it if that's possible.
Very good. How can I help you do that? Why don't we start with, just as a review of what was in this activity-based budgets.
Right.
The idea here was to go in and identify in a little bit more micro level what the activities are within each of the police, each of these departments and programs that are identified. But go in and look at the activities that we don't look at on that finite of detail. So that we understand, like for instance, in police investigations, they have identified that they've got these 3 different activities. What are the resources we have that are going toward the criminal investigations? How many people do we have going into the drug enforcement? So getting a feel, an idea for the resources that are being used for those activities, as well as the outcomes. You know, how many investigations are underway? What's our case completion rate? Things like that.
I'd like
So
an inventory, to be honest with you. How many cars do we have?
Exactly. You know, what are the resources we're using? And,
Right.
you know, right now with, you know, on the police sales tax of vehicles is vehicle maintenance and vehicle acquisition, certainly. So, but that's the gist of what I'm getting at there, is that this would be looking at the critical basic services and identifying, we're identifying what resources we have, how much effort we're being able to throw at things.
I can
And
tell you-
identify maybe things that aren't necessary.
Yes, Mr. Toma Perry, and it's hard for me to look at this and decide, like, in each activity, like prioritize 1 through 50 or whatever. I can tell you this, I know firefighter overtime is top of mind because of the budget number. I know that police vehicles is being talked about fairly often. So that's a very, you know, pointed, specific thing to do. Those, for me, those would be at the top somewhere, along with the capital allotment, project allotment we just talked about. Drilling that deep down in police, you know, not to keep you out of their business or anything, I haven't heard that there are a lot of problems with that, some of these things. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't be auditing them. Everybody should be subject to it ultimately in the city, but you know, my thoughts are there's probably a better spot to stick you than just combing through that, but somebody else
So,
idea.
so there might be other projects, other activities on this list that are a higher priority than police, or maybe this isn't necessary at this point, that you'd rather point me in a different direction altogether.
Yeah, those, I mean, I would put that as my top 3, the capital money allotment, the fire overtime, and the police vehicles.
If I could chime in, of course I will anyway. Number 1 to me is look for the money in the budget, the hidden money that I hope to God we find. Number 2 would be overtime throughout the city, not just in fire, but throughout the city. I don't know if we have overtime problems in police or not. 3rd would be fire. Like, what assets do we have? What inventory do we have? And the next one would be police, same thing. Because I really don't know what our inventory is of equipment in the police department or in the fire department. And we have a public safety sales tax that's funding both of them, and I don't know that we've had an audit for a number of years in either one of them. So now I think is an appropriate time to do it. Mr. City Manager, you're being awful quiet. Now you're holding your head. Is that good or bad?
Oh, I was pushing my earphones back in.
Okay.
No, listen, the reason I was being a little quiet is not because I have any concern. Having previously had the management analyst job, it's really important that, you know, the management analyst has to be able to work unencumbered, unimpeded, and this audit and finance committee really needs to be able to direct it where it wants to go. So I'm not hearing anything I have heartburn about, but it's process-wise, it's important to me that he and you all be able to feel like you're able to navigate without any interference.
Okay, well, then I'm for our top 4 items, Mr. Toma Perry in the order that Councilmember DeLucci listed them. I'm for that being our first four on the list. And I don't know how many more we need to add.
So let's revisit that list in priority order. That's the capital projects,
Yes.
that's fire and police overtime, citywide overtime,
Citywide overtime.
public safety assets, vehicles, other things.
I'd break it down into two separate departments. If I were you, Mark, I'd do fire as one and police as one. Because in both of them, I'm interested in their inventory, their manpower. Like, I don't know if we're short-staffed in fire. I have no idea. And I sort of like to know.
So instead of doing it at the activity level, looking department-wide, say, where are we at?
Do you think? It makes sense to me, but I'm simple like that.
I think focusing on the assets is maybe one of the most important things. Inside of that, it might help with budgeting for next year. It might help us determine our financial standing generally.
And that was obviously part of the exercise as we walk through this in terms of
Right.
making sure we're managing through the pandemic and
Right.
et cetera. I tell you, with the one thing I did forget to mention off the top, I am completing a memo, a white paper on police recruitment and retention that I will
Great.
get out here within the next week or 10 days. And we can revisit that hopefully that'll be on next month's agenda for discussion after the manager and police department have been able to discuss that and everything. That may get at the police staffing. I do touch on that, the vacancy rates and things like that. So that may, and we could always come back. Part of the memo, like I said, on that item number 4, we can always come back at any point during the year and say, hey, well, this has popped up. Why don't let's look at this as well. So we always have those opportunities. So,
Mr. City Manager, didn't you have something about the central garage?
Yeah, one of the things we had talked about was having, right now we've got some of our city departments utilize what we call the central garage. I would tell you that's in name only because we have another city department that 100% or nearly 100% in-house takes care of all their fleet maintenance. We have another city department that sort of does a hybrid. They do some stuff in-house, some stuff they outsource. And then a third city department fully outsources everything else. So it's kind of disjointed, and speculation would tell you that having a more uniform approach would present a citywide cost savings. There's a lot of different ways to provide fleet maintenance services in any city. Some cities are wholly in-house, some cities wholly outsource everything, some do a competitive model where portions of it are in-house, but portions are outsourced. I did an audit back in 2012 where I took a look at this, and we implemented some of those recommendations, but not all of them at the time. But yeah, the management analyst is showing there, they've got some stuff about utility fleet. The recent merger with water pollution control and public works and municipal services, I think this gives us a fresh opportunity to look at that again. And so I would, if it's able to be worked into the work plan, I think city staff would also be very supportive of that as well.
So maybe that could be number 5, the cross-departmental, as Mark has it labeled.
So I personally would limit the review of police and fire, other than fire overtime, but then the review of, I would stick this fits in line with that. Let's look at our assets and how we're maintaining them. So that to me makes sense. Count what the fire department has, count what the police department has, and then take a look at central garage. There's got to be consolidation and savings that we can do inside.
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be. There has to be.
Has to be.
So kind of the audit itself would be kind of a vehicle acquisition and maintenance sort of review. How are we acquiring our fleet? How are we maintaining it? What's kind of a best practice?
Yeah.
Where could we move to? How could we take advantage of the new synergy within that department, et cetera?
That's right. And that would apply also ultimately to water and IPL. And I mean,
Right.
we probably should count chainsaws and stuff too, even ultimately, but the bigger items are most important, of course.
And that's central garage.
And
It
I
sounds
think
like
in terms of
looked at, yeah.
the rolling stock, the rolling stock inventory should be really easy to get a hold of, and
Yeah.
as we've got those systems, so I don't
Yeah,
have any.
I'm mostly interested in, for example, at central garage, who does what? Like, do we send the police vehicles there to be worked on, or they work someplace else? I mean, that's what I'm talking about with central garage. I'd hate to think we're sending stuff out of the city and paying a higher price than we could do it ourselves at central garage. That's all.
If we're paying more to do it at central garage, which is why they're going elsewhere.
And let's find out.
And I would just say again, looking at this citywide, because you're talking about both taxpayers and ratepayers, and I think
Yep.
trying to find out an approach that what is the most cost-effective solution for both of those two constituencies.
Have we totally messed up your ideas now, Mark?
No.
I know. Well, at least he understands all their activities that they're doing. That's helpful in itself.
Yep. So I have 5. The
That was from a
CIP,
previous life.
I have 5. I have the CIP budget, let's find the money, overtime costs, citywide, fire, the assets and the manpower, police, assets and the manpower, and then number 5, central garage. Am I being too simple on that?
No, I think that's
It's a good list.
a good list.
That's a big list. I don't think we should have a number 6. But with everybody's approval, I would ask that we, Mr. City Manager, I believe the code says we should go ahead and get this prepared to present to council for the council approval, which I know it's too late for the study session, but we can at least put it in their box and they can start thinking about it for our next regular meeting.
I would agree with that. I think that's a good approach, and that way they have a couple of weeks to mull it over, and then at the October 5th meeting, if anybody has any formal changes, they could request it. Otherwise, I think that could be endorsed at that meeting, and then Mr. Tone Perry could have his certified work plan.
Okay. I wish
And-
Perkins were here, but I think he'd be okay with this. So, okay.
And then, Madam Chair, back to the projects that I had on the original memo.
Yeah.
That kind of, we had talked last month about item number 3, and that was
Yes.
the report provided to the council last week. So that would certainly, that's not going to be real work on my part, but managing that so. And then number 2, any ongoing monthly financial report analysis. Did you want to have that as ongoing work or identified as something else or taken off?
I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Dan? I mean,
Sorry.
I sort of like an overview, but Brian did a really good overview today. So I don't know that we need more. Dan, we can't hear you. Okay.
I'm sorry about that. What are we picking between, please? I'm sorry.
Number 2, monthly financial report analysis, identify revenue and expenditure trends, investigate issues.
And
I
the
just don't
idea
wanna-
here was, frankly, to use skills that I have, to help fill in maybe some holes that we have right now. I know that we're down a budget person. We don't have extra eyes to be able to look at, financial trends and expenditure trends and things like that, so.
If you have the time, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, I'd say so long as this function is prioritized, but if the city, we all need to do things like this if we can, help out where we can. So if it's, I mean, of course I'm fine with it.
Well, I'm just thinking, now that you mentioned it that way, Mark, like the use tax money, that's coming in, we're at almost 52% right now, we're only 2 months into the year.
Right, just,
You know, maybe you can look in a crystal ball or wave a magic wand and read the future on when are we gonna hit that, you know, magic number for the animal and then for the police? And are we looking at maybe having some coming into the general fund within the next couple of months? I don't know. It'd be nice to have somebody's eyes looking at that though. Yeah.
I mean, it could be on a case by case if, the manager identifies something or we see something coming up or something comes out of the monthly report that we want to follow up on. You know, any of those, again, I'm thinking of my skill set and how I can benefit.
Boy, that'd be awesome.
I appreciate that. And that's, we're so short manpower on things that any extra ideas would be welcome, at least from our committee.
So if you could do like have a number 6 and just mention the additional things you're going to be doing ongoing, just to alert the council that this is also happening. It's not necessarily an audit, but I think they'd like to know what else is going on with their management analysts and this committee. That'd be awesome. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the mandates from the city code for the management analyst is to investigate where things need to be investigated. And like I say, with COVID, with the pandemic and potential multi-year impacts there, I'm just very aware that there's a lot of things that are coming down the pipe here. So wanted to be on my toes and looking and making sure the city was on top of things.
Okay, anything else regarding the management analyst scope of service? So Mark, are you gonna do a memo to Zach? Zach, are you gonna do it? I mean, I think probably it should be from the management analyst to Zach.
Well,
Or
no,
to
I think
me?
actually, I think it should be from you.
Oh,
What if
okay.
Because you are, I mean, this has gone to you. This is the committee proposal to the full council.
Okay, then maybe you and I can get together, Mark, because I don't want to use the bad, inaccurate
Right.
language. I'd
I will-
appreciate that. Okay,
I will draft something up and get it to you early next week.
okay. Okay, is there any other items or any other business? I know it's not actually on the agenda, but we usually have an other business category. Is there anything else anyone wants to alert us to? No? Okay. Next meeting date, people, when will that be? October 23rd?
October 30th.
30th? Okay.
That's the very last Friday, looks like.
I think you guys had your meeting scheduled to be the 4th Friday of the month.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, and that would be the 23rd.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. 23rd it is.
Is the 23rd okay with everybody, 1:30 in the afternoon again? Okay.
Yes.
And Becky, as I understand it, it's all gonna be virtual unless the mayor says we can have an in-person one, is that right?
Yeah, right now, according to our phase plan, all boards and commissions are to meet in the virtual platforms until further notice. So unless
So
you
if
get
the
a
mayor-
prior approval from the mayor's office, then yes, you'll need to meet virtually moving forward.
Okay, and was that by the mayor's edict or was that an ordinance? Like, how did we do
I
that?
think that's part of the state of emergency. Zach, you might be able to provide more information on that.
Sorry, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I would have to go back and look, but I do think it was part of the state of emergency proclamation. I would need to double check that though, Councilman. I don't recall that for certain.
Well, I'm just thinking we're pretty much into the year, and so long as we maintain the mask and, you know, under 100 people in meetings and all that stuff, I don't know why we couldn't meet in person. So maybe what we could do is put an item on our agenda for next, not this Monday, but next Monday, to discuss maybe a modification of the state of emergency. If the mayor will do it, she might say, I'm not willing to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at it.
Because, you know, today's a perfect example. I don't know why I don't have my voice working on my computer, but it's not. And so I'm on the computer, plus I'm on the phone. Yeah, it doesn't have to be this hard. So, okay. All right, people, I think we're done, aren't we?
I think
Mr.
so.
Hobart, you want to move to do something?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
There we go. Thank you, everybody.